Hello everyone, today's session will be on law of persons. Today I will be discussing two topics that are frequently questioned in the question paper, that is termination of marriage and null and void marriages. When we consider termination of marriage or dissolution of marriage, in Sri Lanka this is governed under the Marriage Registration Ordinance and also the Civil Procedure Code. A marriage can only be terminated either by divorce or by the death of one of the spouses. So under section 19(2) of the Marriage Registration Ordinance, three grounds for divorce are stated. The first one is adultery subsequent marriage, then malicious desertion, and also incurable impotency at the time of the marriage. So under Roman Dutch law, only the first two grounds are considered as grounds for divorce, that is adultery subsequent to marriage and malicious desertion. So in Sri Lanka, a marriage can only be terminated by a judgment of divorce, a vincula matrimony, pronounced in a competent court. A vincula matrimony is a Latin term which means from the bonds of marriage. So a marriage can only be terminated by a judgment of divorce from the bonds of marriage pronounced in a competent court. Normally a divorce is granted by the district court. What you should remember is jurisdiction of court is irrespective of the place where the marriage was contracted. So let's say the marriage was contracted in Kandy, but you can obtain your divorce in the district courts of Colombo. Almost every district court has jurisdiction to grant divorce. So the first topic on the divorce is adultery subsequent to marriage. Under section 19 of the Marriage Registration Ordinance, the definition for adultery subsequent to marriage is given. That is extramarital relationship, that is engaging in sexual intercourse with a person voluntarily other than your spouse. Now, there are two important terms in this definition. I'll read it out again. Extramarital relationship, that is engaging in sexual intercourse with a person voluntarily other than your spouse. Sexual intercourse and voluntarily, these two terms are very important. Having an affair, having a mere affair with someone else other than your spouse is not a ground for divorce. This is not considered as adultery. It should be sexual intercourse and that person should have engaged in it voluntarily. And also any sexual intercourse engaged voluntarily should be after marriage. Anything before that, any circumstances before that will not be considered as a ground for divorce. Adultery subsequent to marriage is a civil offense, but the burden of proof is very high. Burden of proof for adultery is beyond reasonable doubt. So the spouse who alleges it should prove it, and also against the defendant and co-defendant, of course. In the case of Ginesy versus Ginesy, it was held that adultery must be proved with the same degree of strictness it is required to prove a criminal offense. Now this states how important burden of proof for adultery is. And then the defendant is the adulterer spouse, and the other party or the plaintiff is the innocent spouse, and the co-defendant is the person in which the adulterer spouse engaged with or had sexual intercourse with. So the innocent spouse or the plaintiff can recover damages from both the defendant and the co-defendant unless the co-defendant was a prostitute. If the co-defendant was a prostitute, the innocent spouse cannot recover damages from him or her. And also if that person didn't know that the adulterer spouse was married previously. So if that person didn't know that fact, the plaintiff or the innocent spouse cannot recover damages. Also, if if the co-defendant was dead or if the name of the co-defendant was unknown. And also, in the plaintiff, it should be stated whether the adulterer or the co-defendant is excused or not. If the co-defendant is excused, then there's no problem. But if not, if the name of the co-defendant is stated in the plaint, it should be supported with supporting facts. Supporting facts are the facts that the adulterous spouse had sexual intercourse with the co-defendant, the name and the date of the instance or the circumstances in which this sexual intercourse was taken place. This is stated under section 599 of the Civil Procedure Code. So under section 598 of the Civil Procedure Code, the damages or compensation that can be recovered from the defendant and the co-defendant by the plaintiff or the innocent spouse are stated. There are three types of damages. The first one is sentimental damages, that is damages that can be recovered for the injury inflicted on the plaintiff. This injury is most of the time not physical but mental. Then the second one is loss of consortium, that is for the loss of companionship and assistance. Then the third one is pecuniary damages, that is for the loss of support and support for maybe household work or maybe business purposes and all. In the case of De Silva versus De Silva, the couple or the spouses were constantly fighting. Therefore, the damages, that is damages for loss of consortium, that is for loss of companionship and assistance, was zero. Since they were always fighting before the divorce was granted or before the termination of marriage, they anyway didn't have any companionship and assistance, so that was zero. And also pecuniary damages, that is for the loss of support and assistance was also zero, because this wife was not supportive of the business of the husband and also didn't do any household work. So that was also zero. The wife could only recover damages for the injury inflicted on her. Then according to section 612 of the Civil Procedure Code, these damages will not be awarded if the alleged spouse, that is the adulterous spouse, lived separately. If the spouses lived separately even before the divorce was granted, then these damages cannot be recovered by the innocent spouse or the plaintiff. And also if the adulterous spouse, that is the defendant, was a prostitute, in that case these damages cannot be recovered. Then under adultery we have a topic that is condonation of adultery. Now in both Roman Dutch law and English law, condonation of adultery is mentioned. Condonation is simply, the meaning is forgiveness. So this should be proved, forgiveness should be proved by the express consent of the innocent spouse or by acts and deeds. It should be by either by express consent or by the acts and deeds of the innocent spouse. Forgiveness is obviously after the other spouse commits adultery. If the innocent spouse forgives the adulterous spouse, then it is known as condonation of adultery. For example, cohabitation after the knowledge of adultery. If they cohabit together, then even though the innocent spouse doesn't expressly say it, by his acts and deeds it is proved that he has forgiven her. Then the fact that the spouses live under the same roof does not show condonation. That is something very important that you should remember. The mere fact that the spouses live under the same roof does not mean that the innocent spouse has forgiven the adulterous spouse. In the case of Keats versus Keats, it was stated that the reconciliation is considered to be complete only upon subsequent marital intercourse. So according to the case of Keats versus Keats, sexual intercourse between the spouses or marital intercourse is the proof or should be proved in order to prove condonation of adultery. The next case is Jayasinghe versus Jayasinghe. Here what happened was the husband wanted a divorce and he went to courts to obtain a divorce on the grounds of adultery committed by the wife. before condemnation. So it was held that a divorce cannot be obtained based on adultery because no adultery could be proved after the date husband forgave the wife. So wife did not commit any adultery after condemnation, therefore a divorce couldn't be obtained. So that's all about adultery under termination of marriage. The next topic or next ground under termination of marriage is malicious desertion. So the definition for malicious desertion is given under Puvalamma versus Aramuguk. The case of Puvalamma versus Aramuguk. Here it is stated that not a mere departure from the house, but a departure for such a length of time and under circumstances to show that the spouse does not intend to return. So two terms are important here. The spouse does not intend to return and for such a length of time. So the mere fact that the spouse has gone for 2 to 3 weeks is not a ground for malicious desertion. And also the intention should be proved. That is very important under malicious desertion. So the two factors that should be proved under malicious desertion is the act of desertion. That is known as factum. Factum is the act of desertion. This should be proved. And also animum, the intention to terminate the marital relationship. Intention to terminate the marital relationship or the intention to not return to the matrimonial house should be proved. That is very important. And also the act of desertion also should be proved along with the length of time. So malicious desertion, there are two types: simple malicious desertion and constructive malicious desertion. So simple malicious desertion is deserting spouse leaves the matrimonial house without a valid reason. Now say for example, the wife leaves the house because of the cruelty of the husband. Then there's a valid reason for the wife to leave the house. Then this is not simple malicious desertion. Simple malicious desertion is the spouse leaves the matrimonial house without a valid reason. Then for constructive malicious desertion, it is circumstances force the innocent spouse to leave. Now if we consider the previous example, the wife leaves because of the cruelty of the husband. So there's a valid reason that forces the wife to leave the matrimonial house. This is known as constructive malicious desertion. Then that's the case for simple malicious desertion, that is Attanayaka versus Attanayaka. What happened here was the defendant left the plaintiff with her mother and later wrote to the mother accusing the plaintiff of adultery and stating that he wants to end the marriage. Now even though the plaintiff is not at her matrimonial house, she is at her house, still the husband is considered to be the deserter, and this is known as simple malicious desertion. This is considered as simple malicious desertion because the husband left the wife even though even though it did not happen in the matrimonial house. Then in constructive malicious desertion, it must be proved that the innocent party was obliged to leave the matrimonial home as a direct consequence of the acts of the other party. Now if we consider the previous example, the wife left the husband's matrimonial house because of the cruelty of the husband. This is a direct consequence of the acts of the husband. So this is considered as a constructive malicious desertion. And the acts, when we consider malicious desertion, the acts can include mental and physical cruelty, as I said before, and also adultery. And also refusal to consummate the marriage is also a reason for malicious desertion. Refusal to consummate marriage is mostly refusing to have sexual intercourse with the other party. So in the case of Van Born versus Van Born, what happened was the wife refused to have any sexual relation with her husband and refused to do housework. So it was held that even living under one roof may still amount to malicious desertion. So not only leaving the matrimonial house physically, but also not deserting the other spouse even after living, even when living under the same roof, that is maybe refusing to have sexual intercourse, maybe refusing to do household work, anything, still this is considered as malicious desertion. And also it is important to remember that the place where this desertion or malicious desertion took place is irrelevant or irrespective of the jurisdiction of court. Then the next topic under dissolution of marriage or termination of marriage, or the next and last ground for divorce, is incurable impotency at the time of marriage. So under section 19(2) of the marriage registration ordinance, it states that it doesn't allow divorce to be obtained for incurable impotency after the marriage. Now it should be at the time of the marriage, and it should be incurable. Now normally impotency is the inability to have sexual intercourse. So this should be incurable, that's the first fact, and it should be at the time of the marriage. Let's say an accident took place after the marriage, and it caused the spouse to have impotency, that is inability to have sexual intercourse. This is not considered as a ground for divorce under section 19(2) of the marriage registration ordinance. So there's a very important case that comes under incurable impotency at the time of marriage, that is Gunathilaka versus Milinona. What happened here was the husband filed action on this ground, and the medical evidence proved that the wife was a virgin, and also other medical proof. Hence the court issued a decree of dissolution. So if the impotency can be cured and the party refuses to it, even then the court will issue a decree of divorce. That's all about incurable impotency. Then the Civil Procedure Code states other grounds for divorce. The first one is after 2 years of judicial separation, divorce can be granted, and also after 7 years of separation, that is without a decree of judicial separation, just 7 years of separation, even then courts can grant divorce. But at present courts will it's very difficult to get divorce under these two circumstances, even if it's stated in the Civil Procedure Code. So we can say that in Sri Lanka, under general law, divorce is completely fault-based. It's completely fault-based, even though other grounds are given under Civil Procedure Code. It's very difficult to obtain divorce on these grounds. That is all about general law in divorce. Then when we consider Thesa Balame, they don't have any law related to divorce. So people who are governed under Thesa Balame will be also governed under general law when it comes to marriage and divorce. Then the Kandiyans have more grounds for divorce, such as incest, cruelty, complete and continued desertion for 2 years, then inability to live together, and also mutual consent. Just having mutual consent, they can obtain divorce without any other grounds. And also there's one thing that you should remember under Canadian law: the application for divorce is made to the district registrar, not to the district courts. In Muslim law, there are 4 types of divorce. Talaq, there are 2 types of talaq. Talaq is for the husband, then kul, which is for the wife, and mubarat is if they have mutual consent, they can also obtain divorce. I will not go into detail under Muslim Canadian under divorce under Muslim and Canadian law. That's all about dissolution of marriage or the termination of marriage. Next topic is null and void marriages. So when we consider null and void marriages, nullity of a marriage is a declaration by court that the marriage does not exist or it never existed. So under section 607 of the Civil Procedure Code, there are two types come under nullity, that is void and voidable. Now this is where most of the students confuse themselves or mix up the void and voidable marriages. Void marriages, it's stated under section 46 of the Marriage Registration Ordinance. Void marriage is something that in the eyes of the law, the marriage was never valid. In the eyes of the law, the marriage was never valid. So the grounds for a void marriage can be, we can divide them into three types. The first one is formal requirements. That is, formal requirements of a marriage are ignored knowingly and willfully. It is very, very important that it is ignored knowingly and willfully by the couple. So under formal requirements, the first one is false names. If either the spouses has entered into the marriage with false names, or any of the other parties that signed to the marriage contract has false names, then the marriage will be void. Then the next one is without certificate of notice duly issued. You know that before marriage, a certificate of notice is issued. If this is not issued before marriage is contracted, even then the marriage will be void unless in a deathbed marriage. You know what is a deathbed marriage is? In an instance where a person is going to die, or in his last moments, if a marriage is contracted, then the marriage won't be void. Then the third one is solemnizing a marriage by an unauthorized person. There are people who are authorized to solemnize a marriage or complete a marriage contract. So if it is not done by an authorized person, the marriage will be void. The second type on the grounds of a void marriage is lack of capacity. That is, as we discussed in the earlier session, lack of capacity is the age, bigamy and incest. Age is if even one of the couple has not completed 18 years of age, then the marriage will be void. And if one of the spouses has a previous marriage which is not terminated, then he or she has committed bigamy and the marriage will be void. And incest, that is marriage between close relatives by blood or by law. Then the third type of grounds, which is grounds under void marriage, is a lack of consent. Lack of consent is by mistake, duress, fraud, intoxication, mental illness or misrepresentation. Let's say that one of the couple is drunk during the marriage. Then the marriage will be void. So maybe the girl was forced to marry. In these cases, the marriage will be rendered void. So there's a very important and famous case under void marriages, that is Vijay Gunawardena versus Gracia Catherine. What happened here was parties willfully went through marriage ceremony in church, knowing fully well that no certificate was issued. Now, what happened here was, even though it was a customary marriage, there are requirements and a certain system in order for a customary marriage to be recognized by law. Now, in this marriage, these requirements weren't satisfied. Therefore, this marriage was not considered a valid marriage and it was rendered void. And the consequences of void marriages are, the first one is the wife won't get the domicile of the husband, and she won't get any properties, or she won't own any properties of the husband or any other related things related to succession. Then the second one is children will be rendered illegitimate. The third one is adultery does not occur in these cases. Say the husband committed adultery during the marriage, since the marriage is considered void, that is, did not exist from the beginning, there is no adultery that has taken place. Then the next topic under null and void marriages is voidable marriages. There is no reference in the Civil Procedure Code or the Marriage Registration Ordinance regarding voidable marriages. Voidable marriage is considered a valid marriage until a decree of annulment is made by courts upon application from one party. This normally happens in a circumstance where one party commits injustice for the other party. The difference between void and voidable marriages is that void marriage is is considered invalid from the beginning, whether the parties like it or not. But in voidable marriages, the parties have the choice to either continue the marriage or render it void. So that's the difference between void and voidable marriages. Then we have 3 grounds that are where a marriage will be considered voidable. The first one is impotency at the time of the marriage. If one of the parties are sexually impotent at the time of the marriage, then the marriage will be considered voidable. If the other party who was unaware of this impotency decides to continue the marriage, then they can do so, or the marriage will be considered void. But you have to remember that infertile or refusal to consummate is not accepted as grounds for a voidable marriage. Then the second ground is not being able to enter into a normal marriage. That is in cases where people have one of the spouses have a personality disorder, or maybe that party being a homosexual person. Then the third one is due to mistake, duress or intoxication. Now, say one of the parties are drunk during the contraction of the marriage, but if that party afterwards decides to continue the marriage, they can do so. But if he decides to discontinue the marriage, then the marriage will be void. Until then, this marriage will be voidable. Then the consequences of voidable marriage are, the first one is domicile of the wife does not change. Unlike in void marriages, the domicile does not change. Then the second one is children are legitimate until a decree of annulment or nullity is granted. There's a famous case under avoidable marriages, that is Navaratnam versus Navaratnam. What happened here was the defendant has given birth to a child after 3 months of the marriage. So the plaintiff was unaware of this circumstance and the marriage was held voidable.